So, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's podcast. I'm so excited to welcome my special guest. Oh my God, I've even had butterflies before today's episode. My tummy was like very excited about this conversation. Truly, I was like, wow, I've been sitting on your Instagram page. Anyway, welcome so much. Thank you so much for being here. We have Caleb Degen joining us this week, who is a trick rider and a lead performer for the Outback Spectacular on the Gold Coast, which I'd love to talk to you about amongst many other things. But first of all, thank you so much for making the time and being here with us.
Not a worry. Thank you for having me. I feel honored.
Yay! So as I was saying, I've been taking a deep dive into your Instagram stories and reels this morning and over the last week or so since I've asked you to be on this show. And I think I would describe your life as like a dream horse person's life. Like your life seems to be, I mean,
Yep,
you live on the Gold Coast in Queensland, which is,
I
if for
do.
those, I mean, there'll be people all around the world seeing this podcast. It's one of those, it's kind of like the Miami of the United States or something like
The
that. Like
Hollywood Hills.
exactly. It's very, it's very beautiful. It's very pristine. So the first question I love to ask my guest, Caleb, and I would love to know from you is, how did horses come into your life?
Yeah, okay. That's a deep dive for sure. So I guess when I was a kid and starting off early without getting too, I guess, sentimental, when I was a kid, my parents split up very early. So my parents divorced when I was about 8. And from that stage, I spent alternate weekends with each. So straight off the bat here, I used to spend every second weekend with my dad, and I used to go to a riding school. So I would get dropped off on a Friday afternoon after school, and originally it was, just a half an hour lesson here and there, and I started really loving it. And I mean, the crazy horse bug, I loved it. So I would eventually get dropped off after school on a Friday, get picked up on a Monday morning. So I'd stay at the riding school all weekend, and eventually that just became the norm. So I would help out there, and I started out mucking out stables and all of that sort of stuff. And by the time I was a very, very early teenager, I was, taking out rides and doing all of these things there, and working with their younger horses there. So that's, I guess, where my affinity and love affair of horses began.
And how did it develop from there? I mean, was there a point where you were like, I mean, trick riding is such a, and you got, if my listeners don't know even what that looks like, please dive into Caleb's Instagram. It's freaking phenomenal the way what you guys train these horses to do, to be in these highly full on and stressful situations and accomplish these tasks that are just amazing. And then what you do with your body as well. Like, what was it? What led you to wanting to be a trick rider?
Yeah, for sure. So I applied to work at Australian Outback Spectacular when I was a fresh little 18-year-old. So nearly 10 years ago now. And I guess it all started there. Trick riding is the norm there. And I guess it's something that we take for granted a little bit at Outback Spectacular because we see it daily. But it's an incredible partnership that you kind of put your riding a horse full stop for me. Every week I sit down and say, this is insane. Like, we are getting these 600 kilogram flight animals to allow a predator on their backs and willing partners. Like, it's crazy. And then you add in the added difficulty of jumping off the side of them while they are cantering and, doing handstands and all of these crazy things. It adds a whole nother element. But Outback Spectacular for me, I started there when I was 18, and I'd worked there for a couple of years before I kind of said, hey, I want to do that. So it was about 2 years in, and I talked to my boss, who's still my boss now, Heidi Mackay, and I said, hey, I want to learn that. So we started doing like the training. We started working out. We have to do a specialized physical that makes sure that your body's not going to break as soon as you step off a galloping horse. And I guess the rest is history. Then I started working with my coach, and her name is Zaylee Bullen. So she has trained animals for film in films that you definitely would have seen. Things like Racing Stripes, Red Dog, all of these incredible films that are, Australian blockbusters that have gone all around the world. So she is an amazing horsewoman and athlete and trick rider herself. So that's where it all started, I guess.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And like, just to fill that gap, like in your high school years where you mentioned, you'd spend the weekends at the riding school right through to where you were like, this is going to be my career. Like, was it that horses were just, and I loved how you described just that relationship, the gratitude and the fortune that we have to build and forge these relationships with these animals. And I don't think it really matters what path you choose to take. And I really that's really why I created this podcast, because all of my guests come from all over the world and all different, interactions and relationships with horses. But it's the one underlying thing is this regard we all have for them, where it's like this awe almost, no matter how long you work with them or how long you're with them for, it never quite goes away. And I sort of say the same thing. I had this little girl horse obsession, which everyone's like, oh, you're a little girl, you'll grow out of that. And, it's not just girls, guys go through the same thing, but it's like, I never grew out of it. I was like, I don't know how anyone grows out of this.
It doesn't happen for some people. And I think that's the beauty of it, is there is 60-year-old ladies and 6-year-old ladies competing in the same sport, and they have that common ground of finding this connection with an animal that allows us to achieve so much more than is physically possible without them. I mean, that's our entire sport, right? Is finding, no matter what it is and what discipline it is, if it's, liberty work that I do, or if I'm trick riding, or if there's show jumping or dressage, it's all boils back down to this love affair that we have with these incredible animals that are just, we wouldn't have our entire sport or my entire career or people's entire lives if it wasn't for what they allow us to do with them.
Yeah. Wow. That's really, that's it right there. And I don't think it matters what path you take. It's really, if you've got that, then you've got what it is. And really my invitation is to those people out there, because I think there's a lot of people in the world that feel like horses are very inaccessible in a way, like it's part of the rich person's world, or you need to be this or you need to be that. But outside of your career and obviously what you've really made of this, like what else do you draw from horses? Like you spoke about they were there, like they became part of your life when you went through the separation of your parents and your family and stuff like that. But can you talk a little bit on, outside of the stuff you do with them for your job, what else horses are for you, if that makes sense?
100%. They're my go-to, full stop, for everything. Whether it's something good, it's something bad, whatever it may be. I think that's kind of that connection and that common ground that I've always found. I talked a little bit about it in a video that I did a couple of years ago, but there's no judgment, and that's, I think, what is my biggest draw card with horses. Like the same way as there's a 6-year-old lady, a 6-year-old girl and a 6-year-old woman, they only care about what you're giving to them. It doesn't matter what you look like, what you've done in the past. It doesn't matter where you come from, if you've got money, if you don't. They treat you how you treat them. Full stop. No variables. That's how they work. And they are, what you see is what you get. And you can have a horse that has been through so much in its life, and it has probably passed through different hands and had to learn to speak different languages with different people. But at the end of the day, if you treat that horse with respect, it's going to respect you back. And I think that's something that is so valuable and so overlooked in not only the horsey world, but in human connection and human relationships as well. There is something there that is so special that they are just, for want of a better word and sounding like a bit of a stereotype, they're so pure. They are that underlying, I guess, common ground of finding that connection. And that's, for me, I guess, I do a lot of liberty work and groundwork with horses now, simply because it's so, it is so pure. It is that connection, and finding that connection with an animal that doesn't speak English per se, but we can connect with them through body language and through all of what we do. But going back to your original question, I think for me, it's finding that connection with an animal and finding that respect and mutual respect to allow us to achieve all of those things.
Yeah. And I think like with what you've been saying, like just listening to what you say, I think in a lot of ways we aspire to be more like them. Like there's this thing that they show us where, because they don't do judgment. There's no judgment in their world. They don't adhere to time. I mean, how often are you like, all right, I've got an hour, I'm going to get out and do blah, blah, blah. And your horse is like, no, you're not.
Not today.
I'm going to do whatever the hell I want, and you're going
Yeah.
to, come along and try and keep up with me or whatever. Like, there's no judgment, there's no time, there's so much forgiveness in their world. Like, they have all of the attributes, I think, that we actually deep down aspire to have ourselves. And I think this is also the thing I want to invite people to, is this place where it doesn't matter if you get into professional riding or if you have a chance to just go and volunteer somewhere and help muck out stables and maybe groom some horses, like really to get into their space and see what is possible to exist on this planet more like they are, like that pureness, exactly like you said, this way that they're willing to show us that you can actually be like that in the real world as well. So I don't know if there's anything you can think of where like they've kind of helped you in that way as well. I mean, I'm sure in your career there's been times of like stress where you've got to deal with different people and different things come up. Like, have horses also assisted you to take some of that and apply it in like the human world, if that makes sense?
Yeah, every day of the week, to be totally honest, because there's no room for hiding with horses. You can't say one thing and mean another. They're going to read you like a book. So that's taught me so much. I think I used to be, and in some ways I still am, I can be quite introverted. That seems crazy now because I perform for a living and I do all of these things where I've got to be this big, huge face and on and smiling. But often with people, it's not always what you see is what you get. Sometimes someone can say something can mean another, and you've got to work out the underlying tone of what they say and what they actually mean by it. But with horses, there's none of that. Hey, he's going to give you exactly how he feels and then display that in how he acts. Full stop. And I think that's the most beautiful part, is they are so clear in how they communicate. And for me, that's helped me moving up in my career and my life and dealing with people, is that I think people find respect for you if you are upfront and honest, and not in a way of going, shutting down or saying you did that badly at all, but just that clear line of honesty and communication to find that little bit of mutual respect. And I say that so often, but that mutual respect of going, I will happily communicate and tell you how I'm feeling about this situation so that you can then deal with it in whatever way you see fit, rather than trying to work something out from what is said. So I've like I said, I've been at Outback nearly 10 years now. And I started off as a little wee stockman there that was terrified of talking to anybody. And now I find it so much easier to communicate with people and talk to them about how they may be performing or how they're feeling even, or how that affects the way that they perform. And that's such an underrated form of communication for me, to help people to feel better about themselves, to go out there and then actually perform and exude that confidence and have that shown to the audience.
Yeah. And what a gift that is for people too, because exactly like you said, we grow up in a world where a lot of people, what comes out of their mouth doesn't necessarily match what's going on in their head. And I think exactly what you've said is something horses have shown me as well, is the first language of the universe really is energy. Like, it's really this thing where if you can start to, and they display energy through their body language and through what they're showing you with their bodies. But there's also this moment almost before any of that where if you're willing to be like a bit more like a horse and sort of shut your mind up and allow yourself to sort of really perceive what's going on, there's this really cool space where you get to actually start to perceive and communicate the energy of things. And I think myself with people as well, then you get around people and it's almost like the static in their world becomes so much more obvious. And I think
yes
yeah. And sometimes it's not like you can say to a person, hey, blah, 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 you should stop that. Or if you could just do this, it would be easier on you. But there's definitely a phenomenon, or something that I've started to discover, is that when we're willing to be that, like to be congruent with ourselves, with the energy of a situation, to have that clarity, that it actually just somehow naturally invites the people around us to have that as well. And I don't know if you've noticed, like, we can almost become, which is what horses are, right? Like this, I don't know, like this conduit to have people be invited to that space to have more peace in their world and be open more to, I don't know, that level of space and awareness.
Yeah, I think what you said earlier really resonated, of that concept of time. For me, that is something that is so difficult for me to grasp even now. I can get super busy, like
Yeah.
everybody does. And you have ABC, and I've got a list of, I've got my whiteboard, which has days, times, dates. This is happening. I've got an hour for this. I've got 40 minutes for that, and I can't be late because I've got to drive and there might be traffic. That's something that we've created. Like,
Yeah.
it's something that humans have created in their own world. And I think sometimes we only sort of understand a feeling of achievement once we're busy. Like, I haven't done enough for today, so I'm not validated. And that is something that I've had to grasp massively, and I struggle with it daily, because I'm the sort of person that says, hey, you had 2 spare hours there, you could have done something to make tomorrow a bit easier. But horses don't have that. It's the right now. Like, they're living for this minute of that herd animal saying, hey, we just got to eat, sleep, drink water, be social, and be safe. And then
Yeah.
everything else on top of that is a bonus. Whereas for humans, and I think sometimes we overcomplicate what goes on in our lives to then make it so busy that we don't have space to allow any of those connections in. And often
Yeah.
we have this crazy schedule of, I'll talk to you in May next year. How does that work?
Yeah.
And it's not guaranteed. Like, none of that is actually guaranteed. You don't know what's gonna happen tomorrow or the next day. And that's something that, for me, living in the moment and being present in my own body rather than thinking about the future every minute. Like, even right now, sometimes, like, the back of your mind, I find myself thinking about, oh, hang on, where are we going for lunch again? What are we doing? What have we
Yep.
got going on after this at 9:30? And it's so silly, because right now I'm should be sitting here in the moment, and I have to find myself bringing myself back into my present body to make space for whatever else is going on around me.
Cool. Yeah, it's so true. And how often the other part to that for me is this thing of patience, like
Mhm.
patience and relaxation. I think are two other things that horses have shown me so much, because I'm very much like you. Like, the lists on my desk, like, my brain is like, if it's in my head, I'm like, and if I can just write it down, I make a list,
Sticky
I write
notes. I
things
have
down.
sticky notes for everything.
Everything. Like, I've got that many notebooks on the go. It's just crazy. But like, this thing of I don't know, I'll get a little bit like woo woo here, but when you're willing to kind of let go of that and you watch horses do it, there's such a timing of the universe as well. Like, when you're willing to have that presence with you, with your horse, with the moment, like your body, whatever's going on right now, all of that other stuff will actually take care of itself. Like you said, with horses, it's the eating, drinking, feeling safe. Those key things that they have, they're all almost like everything else will be okay if I just have the base things that meet my requirements and what I require and desire. Everything else actually will be taken care of in a way. Because I don't know about you, but I'm also like, if I have an idea or I want something, I'm like, well, I want it now. I don't want to
Mhm.
have to wait until, and even with my horses, I'm like, well, I want you to know this, or I want you to be good at this. And I
Yep.
approach them with that. And they're like, I have no idea what,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
this is that you're
Literally.
asking me.
Get off me.
Yeah. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that, like the process that, because I've watched a few of your videos, and with the liberty work and the different training that you do with your horses, like how does the timeline work with introducing a new concept to a horse, especially when it's something like, I watched the video where you guys were on the beach and the horses are running, they're doing their thing. Like, how do you introduce a concept to them, and how is it that you play with time and timeline of things?
Yeah. So it's changed a lot for me very recently. And I think the tipping point for me was understanding to enjoy the journey, not the destination. So for me, I used to be very physical goal oriented. And don't get me wrong, that's my biggest thing, is you need to have some kind of a goal that you're working towards. But if that goal is the be all and end all, then you're
Yeah,
going to miss all of this beautiful stuff along the way.
yeah,
And that's how I used to work. I used to say, okay, I'm going to train my horse to lay down, and that's what's going to happen. but then I'd miss all of these steps along the way, and my horse would get worried about all of these little bits and bobs that I was doing along the way, because all I had in mind was the end result and the goal. And I think that's sometimes the same with what we do. What I do with my horses now is I go, okay, we're going to think about, hey, lowering your head. And this is just a physical example, but that's the first step to a lay down for me. And then I found my training was coming along in leaps and bounds so much quicker. And I was actually achieving the goal in half the amount of time, because I wasn't putting so much pressure on a physical result, rather actually the feeling of the journey that we were going along together to get to this place. And you blink, and now I've got, multiple beautiful horses that do all of these incredible things, just because I actually let go of this physical be all end all, have to do this by a certain date kind of a
Yeah.
thing, if that
Wow.
makes sense.
Totally. And it's like, it's so interesting how if you're just willing to change that one thing, how you also said, your training came along faster. But the other big key thing is you now have horses willing to do that job, and they're super comfortable with it. Like they actually desire to do this thing because you were so much more relaxed. Like you didn't have this
Yeah.
concept of, and then so it's almost like you guys become this thing because you're functioning like them, and they just have the trust increases, the relaxation increases, like
Mhm.
everything in their world becomes more comfortable, and all of a sudden you have these horses that just makes it look like it's naturally what they desire and want to do for you.
Yeah, yeah, it's a pretty cool feeling when you can tell that your horse is a willing, I guess, partner rather than a subservient. I think that's the biggest thing for me, is you can force an elephant to sit on a little tiny piece of string if it doesn't know any better. But for me, I guess, wanting to allow my horses to express themselves in a way that they are comfortable, rather than feeling trapped or like they are forced to perform per se, is what I'm all about now, and finding that feeling of partnership rather than telling a
Totally.
horse what they need to do.
Totally. And I'm so interested to know, who are your mentors? Who are your heroes? Who do you have people that you look up to when it comes to the way you train your horses, or have you really taught yourself a lot of this just through your own experiences along the way?
I think horsemanship is your own journey, full stop. I think that it has to be, and it can't be anything other than that. If you are trying to mimic somebody else, you're never going to feel so truly about it. I think you have to take bits and bobs from whatever you've seen and learnt, and have to forge that into your own way of doing things, because otherwise it's going to feel forced every day of the week if you're trying to read a book and then apply a method, or watch a video and do ABC. It has to come from you, because the horse is going to feel it otherwise. Having said that, yes, I've had some huge mentors in my life. When I was a kid and in high school, I was lucky enough to be a part of an equestrian program. So throughout school, we'd get to take our horses to school, and on a Friday, we would spend the entire Friday working with our horses, as part of the school curriculum. So a lady called Leah McCarran was my first, I guess, idol and person that I looked up to in that space. She taught me everything from the ground up after my riding school days. And then second of all, who I talked about, Zaylee Bullen. So Zaylee has taught me to feel, I think, which is the biggest thing. The biggest thing in my horsemanship journey was, it's not a theoretical ABC makes 1, 2, 3 happen. It's
Wow.
feel and timing and how you communicate and your intention and all of those things that the horses feel, rather than, you know, a certain whip cue means a certain thing. So she's been a massive, massive building block in my horsemanship journey, and she still continues to this day. You know, I still talk to her about things if I get stuck, and she helps me with trick riding every fortnight at work, and we do all of these things. But yeah, she's been a huge, huge part of my journey.
Wow, that's amazing. And I loved how you prefaced all of that with like how much it's really about you. And yeah, I mean, I've followed so many different horse people over my life. Like, I've explored, there's so many things out there, right? Like
Mm,
you go down this rabbit hole and you find this person's version and this theory on that and that. But I love what you said there, because really for me, I find my rhythm where, exactly like you say, you take parts from everywhere, but you apply it through you, like based on your, and your perception of things, and also the horse you're working with today. Like, I have 2 horses that live here with me. My horse is here at my home. And the other cool thing that I've found about horses is they're never the same the next day. I think I watched one of your, you're very funny as well, by the way. I love your sense of
some days.
Well, I love, because I just love to laugh. I mean, I think if you're not having fun and happy and having a good time of it, it's like, what's the point? Exactly. I watched one of your videos where you're in the shower and you're like, that day when you get on your horse, expecting them to have remembered everything that you trained them, and they pull like Santa's sleigh. But it's so true. Like, when you're willing to approach your horse and not expect them to be the horse they were yesterday, and go with the feel, exactly what you said that your trainer showed you as well. Like, how do we have more of that? Like, how can we have more of that in this world with our horses, but with our people as well?
I think that humans by design are taught to act a certain way. And I think that we have these social constructs that we create that we feel like we have to abide by, otherwise we're going to get judged. If there's these, say someone introduces themselves to you, they're always going to say, "Hi, how are you?" And you are obligated to say, "Good, thanks. How are you?" Doesn't matter how you're feeling. Like, it's probably half a lie sometimes, half time it's true. So for me, I think that is something that we need to look into ourselves a bit more, of how horses act. They are not going to fake it. So if you're not giving the right vibes, if they're not feeling it that day, they're not going to say, "Good, thanks, how are you?" They're going to say, "Hey, I'm not feeling it today." Mares are feeling their hormones. A stallion might be looking at a horse down in the other paddock. A gelding might just be having an off day, and he's going to show you that physically through his body language. Whereas humans, like I said when we started, have this face up of saying, "I need to be on today because these people are going to judge me otherwise." And fear of judgment is something that's such a big thing that I think every human faces. And once we can master a little bit of control of that, I fear it every day. It's terrifying. This morning I got up and out of bed and I had to put a shirt on because I'm going on to a podcast, and all of these things where we have these underlying social constructs that we have to abide by. Otherwise, we have this underlying fear of being judged, whereas horses don't have that. So working with the horse that's in front of you on that day is, it's paramount. You have to.
Yeah. And the other thing that kind of weaves into this as well, that's helped me a lot, is horses don't take things personally. Like, they don't do something to you to be like, "Well, you annoyed me yesterday, so today," like, they don't, which is like exactly like you said, our whole construct with each other being people is to kind of always have this like give and take system of like, what do I owe you? What do you owe me? You did this to me. But anyway, like the thing I really want to highlight here is like how much I've learned from my horse. It's like, sometimes you'll go into the field, you've done some work with your horse, you let them off. And sometimes they'll stay with you, sometimes they'll graze, and sometimes they'll look at you, bolt in the other direction, fart, buck up in the air. And, you can stand be like, "Oh, why did my horse do that? Did they not like me? Did I offend them somehow during?" No, the horse doesn't give a shit. They just feel like they want to buck and fart and throw their feet in the air. It's like, it's so interesting to me as well, how we take things so personally from one another. And horses don't, they're like, they'll kick another horse, double barrel another horse, and 2 minutes later they're grazing side by side.
Best friends. That's what and I think that, hey, I'm not condoning violence, but I think that the world would be a much better place if we just said how we felt and then moved on. But what happens is we hold on to these things and hold grudges for so long. Like, some people, 10 years, and they're still thinking about something someone said to them, in high school. And yes, for sure, that's something that we need to take into account. But if we just went, "Hey, piss off, and then didn't think about it again, far out how carefree and lovely our lives could be. And that's, I think, something that we're trying to strive to achieve a tiny bit, 10% of what horses do. You know, they express how they feel in that moment, and they don't hold on to it, and then they move on.
Yeah.
And then they're grazing. It's something so simple and so powerful, I think.
Yeah, and imagine how much more space we would have in our world and in our heads to actually focus on possibilities and creation if we weren't constantly thinking about
dwelling on what someone said or how I spoke at that party last week, and oh my God, I acted such a fool, how embarrassing, they're all talking about me. Whereas they're like, oh yeah, moved on, done.
Yeah. Let's go graze, or let's run and like play and be joyful and have fun. It's like,
I think life can be as complicated as you'd like to make it. And it's such a thing that I'm trying to learn. And hey, don't worry, I'm not at all sitting here on my high horse, pardon the pun, but I'm trying my best to find a way to simplify life and have those connections that form positive reinforcements rather than dwelling on all of these negative things that can happen, will happen, have happened.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean anything. This has been so cool. What a cool conversation. And I mean, I would love if we sort of maybe had this as a bit of an introduction into your world. And I'd love to have you on again at whenever in the future, and maybe we can focus on a few of these topics or a few more cool stories. But the thing that comes across so beautifully in your world, Caleb, is your self-awareness, like this you that is very you, that shines through, that you've trained and taught yourself. Like how have you gotten where you are? Is it really just been your journey through life? Has there been anything that you can recommend to people that helped you in a way? And I mean, obviously horses, but anything else that has assisted you in having this level of you presence and whatever that is?
Yeah, I think that bad things are bound to happen, like full stop. You're never going to avoid that. And once you understand that happens, you can't control the world around you, but you can control how you react. And for me, that's been the biggest turning point, to try and understand that I can't control how other people are going to act. I can't control if something bad is going to happen, if, anything around me is going to go wrong. But what I can do is rationalize with myself and understand that I can control how I'm going to retaliate to that situation. And the only person that affects is me, is something that I find so useful for my own self. And don't get me wrong, there is so many times where I can't do that and it all goes out the window and I'm broken down and I'm swearing and all of those things. But then you take a minute to come back into your own body and rationalize with yourself and understand how much good there is and how much we can actually take from this situation and move forward in a way that's going to benefit me. Because holding on to things and holding grudges, I can almost guarantee you the other person isn't thinking about it. It just affects you. Like, it just eats up at you and takes up this massive space, like you said, in your own self, to then not allow all of these things around you that are happening. The world goes on, whether you're there or not, whether you're sitting in your room having a sulk or a cry about it, or you're out there enjoying the beautiful sunshine and the green grass, it's going to keep going with or without you. So it's your choice whether you would like to be out there and be a part of it and make all of these positive connections, or if you want to sit down and think about and dwell on all of the bad that might happen. So rationalizing with yourself is my biggest thing. It sounds so stupid, but I used to have a key word that I would say just to snap myself out of it and go, hey, that's enough now. You've had your time. And it's not about not allowing yourself to feel all of those, negative emotions. You have to let them out. But then say, come on now, okay, you've had your time, you've validated that. Look at all that's happening around you and you're missing it.
Yeah. And what was the word? What was your word? Will you tell us?
Pineapple.
So it's literally just like a random word that
just
goes.
A word. Yeah, but
wow.
it's the association of the word that then allows you to snap yourself back into a state of consciousness rather than dwelling and spiraling out of control into this place that then you go, hang on, what am I even, like, what's actually wrong here?
Yeah. 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 And it's that thing of like, how much time do we spend focused on problems? And in that time, we could be focused on the possibilities in life. I Yeah, I completely agree. And I think you're just such a perfect example of what being around horses and really being truly willing to allow them into every aspect of your life, what it creates. So one last question, and then I'll let you go. Do you do coaching? Do you train people on horses? Do you talk to people about this way of life that you're aware of and that you live?
Yeah, I definitely do. And I was going to say, one of my favorite things that people say in lessons, I'll always say, so how do you think that went? And I guarantee you, like without a shadow of a doubt, they will pick 3 things that they could have done better or their horse did wrong or what they could have worked on. There is a tiny minority that actually then say, oh, I think that went well and that went well and this was good. So yeah, I definitely do. I just did a clinic yesterday, actually
Oh,
just down the
wow.
road, and it was really awesome. And it's so fun seeing this space where people of all ages and sexes and religions and heights and all of these different things come together and bond over that mutual understanding of wanting to achieve a deeper connection with an animal. Like, it's so odd when you put it like that, but it's so cool to achieve these results with people from all walks of life. But yes, short answer, I do some lessons from home. We're heading down to Equitana in a few weeks. If there's anyone on here listening that is heading down or lives in Melbourne, come and say hi. I'd love to meet you and say g'day. But yeah, I do start to open up that little bit of a world. And hey, I'm learning every day myself. I think the day we
Yeah.
stop learning is the day we stop living. So,
Yep.
but yes, I do.
Well, I think the best way to be a better facilitator of whatever it is you facilitate is to facilitate. Like the act of teaching or facilitating something within itself is always, for me, the best teacher, the best way to learn more about me, the best way to learn more skills in what I'm teaching other people. And
Yep.
so I completely get it. And like you said, life is a journey. We're all on this meandering path to somewhere, taking the various twists and turns that life throws at us. But I'm so grateful for this conversation, and I'd love to grab off you, and we can post in the show notes how people can find out about taking lessons with you, asking for a friend, but I'd really love to know that information as well.
For
Because
sure.
I'm so happy that we're only a few hours away from each other. And as I expand my skills on my horse journey, I love meeting people like you and having access to this. So thank you so much, Caleb. I'm
Thank you.
so
Thanks
happy
for
and so
having me.
grateful. Yeah, just what a cool conversation. And you're such a gift. Thank you for being such a joyful and amazing person. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll have show notes out with all the ways you can watch and get a hold of Caleb and see the amazing possibilities he's creating in this world. And we'll see you next week for the next episode of Let's Talk Horses. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye, Caleb.